I've got some bad news. We're too early. We should have stayed in bed. If you're in the pro-AI camp, unfortunately, you are in the minority. You'll have tomatoes thrown at you around every corner. Society gives you nothing for being early. By the time the people throwing tomatoes have accepted the fate of reality, they forgot that you were here to begin with. We all remember Skyrim when it came out. Skyrim had major criticism. It was so bad that people were going back to oblivion. Prior to Skyrim coming out, people hated this game. Facebook. You remember how people felt about Facebook back in the day? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're not old enough. But I was old enough to have a profile, but not old enough to be an adult and actually post much on there. My parents did not want me post on MySpace. But I do recall a time period where Facebook was considered the weird one. And now we're back full circle. But the point here, the people that were early to Facebook, do you even remember who they were? I sure as hell don't. Like I said, bad news for you. I have bad news for you. You are not gonna be recognized for this. The day will come where people wake up for the sunrise of AI, right? We can envision this as the AI orb, but it's gonna happen over time. People will latch onto something else to complain about. They're taking our gerbs, our skrills, and replacing it with Skills MD. They're devaluing our CS degree. Now, this isn't true at all. I don't think a CS degree ever taught you much about coding. It was more about fundamentals and theory, but this is the mindset that people have that they won't tell you. Translates into things like, this is how I know you're not a software engineer. I've seen posts like this, right? If you're using AI, you were never a software engineer, apparently, because you're not allowed to agree with this position. You're going to regret this, that somebody's going to have to come in and clean up, because apparently humans weren't doing that already. Resonate with this. I do. I don't think everyone has to be all balls to the wall AI, but I would never once tell somebody they are doing something wrong for supporting this. This is the sad violin that we are playing for the anti-AI people. While they're wasting time angry, people who are in this camp are actually making progress. But again, you're not going to get praised for this. People aren't going to care about this 10 years from now. Dude, it's shit like this that makes me realize there's always room for something new. If people are willing to buy this shit, there's always an avenue to get in, right? We can find a way to create this, but in the software space. Personally, I identify as an AI. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read this human written article. Right, currently it has AI enhancements enabled. I'm going to disable this. We're going to read this raw. Gabriel Cohen, he goes on to say there are two visions for the future. AI as a deity built by and serving a small group of clergy. My knowledge of faith comes from RuneScape. To be honest, I have no clue what clergy is, but I'm guessing it's something like person with a prayer above their head in RuneScape. Humans in the center with AI as an amplifier. This is how I feel, right? Humans in the center with AI as an amplifier. There's still some human in the loop. Don't give me that goddamn loop engineering BS. Loop engineering still requires some human in the loop. Don't come at me with the Boris Turnsky quote. While the average human hears mass unemployment as a death sentence, how do they make rent, buy food for their kids? Okay, we're starting to see this is written by a human because it's kind of hard to follow. I'm going to enable the AI enhancements because I want to make sure we can... No, never mind. Software development gives us a peek into the future because software developers got agents a year before everyone else. And so he's really viewing it as a productivity boost here, right? He says the super users were 2 times as productive, and over the past 1.5 years, that's steadily increased to 5x, then 10x, then 100x. Now, I want to double click on this because I often see an argument going around, and when I read this, I think it's absurd, but it's a common argument I see, right? We say, oh, yes, we're outputting more lines of code, but it's a lot of slop, right? It's a lot of stuff that we have to worry about all the time. I definitely think there's parts of this that isn't 100x. I think it depends. It's definitely more nuanced. And maybe he goes into this, but certain cases where it's 100x, but there's definitely cases where it's little benefit. I would say there's no case though that I can think of. Maybe if you can think of a case where AI truly does not accelerate it, because I can't think of one right off the top of my head. Every case I can think of has some benefit from using AI. 5 to 10x seems more realistic. 100x, it depends who you are, right? If you're somebody who'd never coded before, I'm sure it's a lot more than that even, right? So there's a lot more nuances to this. And he goes on to say, the best agentic developers are climbing towards 1000x, doing massive rewrites of code bases that would have taken years of engineering in days. Now, I assume this is talking about the bun rewrite. Let's see, what year is this built? What year was this built? What day was this posted? July 11th. Very fresh off the presses. So I think we all know what he's talking about with that one. Now, in this case, I think, I hate to nitpick because, I hate when people nitpick my arguments, technically this wouldn't have happened if it like they wouldn't have wasted their time on this rewrite if it weren't for AI. Like the benefits wouldn't have been there to spend years and years and millions of dollars to do. If we didn't have the agents, it wouldn't have happened anyway. But again, that is not the argument he's making, and I hate when people do what I just did. So I'm going to shut up. I also don't really understand this part. I'm going to read it out to you. Maybe you understand it differently. He says the median developer hasn't gained any meaningful increase at all. They're still within a rounding error of 1x. Every week there's a new release of a model or a feature, 4.6, 4.8, 5.5, Fable, Soul, hooks, skills, loops, workflows. With each release, the super user unlocks a new level, while the median just gets more confused and the gap keeps growing. I question this one, right? When I read this, I'm thinking, okay, that tells me that most developers are not using AI. And while that might be the case, I feel like even people that are anti-AI are benefiting from it in some way. Maybe there's still people raw dogging Google search, but I would say there's a group of people that are no AI where it's like they code by hand. And I respect this, absolutely. Right? At the end of the day, I think everyone works differently. People that, they use AI purely for the documentation parsing portion. It saves them time understanding the system, reading the documentation. They don't use it to code at all, but they do save time on that portion, which is actually quite a bit, right? So it may not be 100, 1000x, but definitely I think they, on average, are still seeing more than a 1x improvement. I guess it depends what they're working on. And he also says, right, the median hasn't budged, neither has the average. I don't know where he's pulling this from, because from what I think, maybe I'm somebody who just only interacts with people that use AI, which is possible, but I feel like most developers are really budging at this point. If you're not using AI in some way, I can't envision a world where you are still employed. I'll be honest. Like I've interacted with engineers that have 30 plus years of experience even, right? These dudes are pushing 50, 60. I've interacted with these people and they are using coding agents. So I'm surprised if this is true, that really there is a median that hasn't budged. That would surprise me. I would love to see some kind of metric that shows that and where he's pulling it from. Anyway, this article is mainly focusing on the fact that we still need humans. It's kind of like how we can view the AI as a tractor. At the end of the day, somebody has to be in the seat doing these sick wheelies. Somebody has to operate this thing. And that's kind of how it is with AI, where it's like, dude, yeah, we're going to be changing things, but at the end of the day, you need agents for the core growth engine of your business, and they need to be managed by you and your team. They need to be your agents, not somebody else's. And you need to focus on growth, not reducing headcount. You need fewer humans doing manual work, but you need more agent managers, and the best people to be those agent managers are the people who are currently doing the work, right? This is absolutely something I agree with too. Something that a lot of companies are really messing up on, right? They're firing senior devs and hiring junior devs. I've seen a lot of reports about this. The problem is that while AI has gotten better and better, there are still cases where the senior dev is going to have knowledge that is important more than ever when it comes to prompting the AI. At the end of the day, you have to define like exit criteria for everything that's going into the system. There are certain fields where it's like, dude, if you don't have somebody that understands the product really well, and on top of that, understands the history of the product and the market, this could really hurt you. We still need these people because they know this better than anyone else. And that really, this part right here, this is a super agree. I super agree with this, right? You underestimate how much relationships matter on a team. Typically, like let's say you have, an architect and an engineer. A senior engineer that's been working with an architect or, product manager, whatever the case, they have so much years of back and forth rapport. It really does matter when shit hits the fan. If you fire that senior engineer that has, 10, 20 years of relationships with everyone that's like building the upper layer, right? Defining the requirements in the product. Because typically you're not going to hire juniors to, do the product management or the architect work. Maybe product management if they come from like a certain school or something, but architect work is usually reserved for the people that have, a lot of experience on stuff. And so if you take a junior engineer and you thrust them into this team and you just expect they're going to click with the architect like this, it's not going to happen. Hopefully over time they can build up that relationship, but typically a junior engineer can't capture the same level of relationships that a senior engineer has had with his team for, freaking many years. And it goes higher than this, right? It goes up to the executive level, right? How are you supposed to get buy-in when you fire the people that had a voice, right? There's executives at companies where it's like they know that, hey, if this senior engineer down here speaks up, we have to listen. There are cases like that. There's structures like that. When it's a junior engineer, you have no voice. And so you lose that voice when you fire the senior engineer. And that's definitely a bad outcome. And so this article, it's mainly harping on the fact that we still need human beings. Yes, the agents are doing a lot of the coding, but we need people to manage these agents, yada, yada. You know, you've heard this a million times. We're agent managers now. And so I get it, man. I think it's very easy to feel like this in the current market, right? You're hearing of news of layoffs. You're seeing all these beautiful advertisements about agents taking over like entire workflows, all this. You have to realize that a lot of this has more nuance to it, but it gets sold as being AI, right? Layoffs often have way more to it than just AI. Companies fuck up a lot and then they need an excuse for doing it. We're seeing that with Microsoft, with Xbox, except in that case, right, they're actually realizing, yeah, really the Microsoft Xbox layoff, I must say, at least they aren't coping. They're not claiming it's AI. They're claiming, yeah, we fucked up. If all these companies that have been claiming AI was the reason, if they were honest, they'd be saying shit like Microsoft does with Xbox, where it's like, dude, we just made bad decisions and we have to pay the toll. And the agents taking over part is almost a byproduct of it, right? When a company says, hey, we're laying people off because of AI, it incentivizes them to make sure that they push this narrative of agents taking everything over and we don't need people to do this shit anymore. Pretty much anyone you see that's like, even this article owner, I haven't done it, but I imagine, oh, even here you could see creator of NanoClaw, right? I'm sure this is a product he's selling. An OpenClaw alternative. Okay, so this is like an open source OpenClaw alternative. It has a lot of stars, so right. Even this guy has some skin in the game. The only reason I read it is because I agree with a lot of his points. But you have to realize that a lot of people that are selling this part here are underestimating the human element because they benefit from it. AI does X, AI does Y. They're not going to talk about, in the grand scheme, how it impacts your workflow. They're going to talk about how it impacts that specific thing that it's tackling, because that sounds way better. If you were to tell me, hey, AI is just going to accelerate my workflow 20%, I think, oh, that's pretty nice, but I'm not going to, be up in arms about it, and I may not even find it worth it. But when you tell me it does this thing, and it does it, like I don't even have to think about it at that point, you best believe I'm buying into this. But obviously it benefits them to cut out the your part, right? We just want to cut out as much portions of this that makes it sound like our product is doing everything for the user. But at the end of the day, dude, we are going to have to do work. This is still work. While AI is doing a lot for us, there are still aspects of it that we have to manage. And this is not going to change anytime soon. Loop engineering is not going to change this. You're going to have to define entry and exit criteria, right? If you're a super proponent of loop engineering, tell me, how are you going to solve this part here? How are you going to break out of this loop? What is the criteria that ends this loop? It requires some human to come in and put up some kind of logic that defines an exit point. And so even with loop engineering, there is an aspect of managing that the human has to do. But so if I'm trying to sell, this device here on somebody, I'm not going to tell them, hey, it gives you the opportunity to improve your workflow by 20%. I'm going to say, like, let's assume this truck here is AI. I'm going to say AI digs up the dirt. I'm not going to say that it really it only does part of it, right? You still got to actually control this damn lever here. As we're seeing this user error, all right, let's go into this. You can tell he does successfully pull it up, but then he kind of just freaks out. I think he hallucinated the pulling operation. I think he didn't see that the dirt was actually in there. And so he went down thinking, oh man, I don't have my dirt. Anyway, AI digs up the dirt. This is what you'd be saying, when in reality, it's AI increases the pickup of dirt or improves the pickup of dirt. But let's assume he was out here with a tiny little cup, a watering cup, trying to pick up dirt. Obviously, this is a benefit to him, but we're not going to tell customers that. They're not going to say AI improves the pickup of the dirt. They're going to say, hey, it does it for you. Or they're going to cut out some words here. They're going to say AI picks up dirt. Because technically this is true, right? The forklift, it does pick up the dirt, but it's leaving out so much nuance to it. Right, we could just go to Claude's iOS page and kind of just read these. The AI for problem solvers, right? This sounds way cooler than AI that accelerates Google search by 99% or something like this. Like, this sounds too complicated and it doesn't sound as cool as just saying it solves problems. Claude plans tasks, pulls in relevant context, and adapts its approaches as your project evolves. Writes programs through natural conversation and uses Claude to identify and fix errors faster. Notice how it never mentions in this the human, because it wouldn't sell as well, right? If they were to tell you, hey, Claude will take in your prompts and do all this, or the human can plan, like, it wouldn't sound as good. It does say it at the top here, right? Claude works with you to write researched code and tackle. And so it kind of gets it out of the way, so that way it's being clear about the intent. But oftentimes it's like just this. Claude searches, like, they're not going to tell you what goes into enacting this part here. At the end of the day, while you might be feeling like this person on the ground here, and I get it, with all the bad news that we hear day in and day out, but there's a quote that I think everyone should really embody at this point. I don't think this is the exact quote, I just typed it up from memory, but there's a quote that's something like this, where it says basically, don't learn to weather the storm, learn to dance in the rain. Instead of being like this person, You should be like this person. Embrace the way it is, learn what you can learn, realize we're going to still be a man in the loop at some point, and just proceed. There's going to be a place for you somewhere at some point. This is not going to change. If you're identifying yourself as a glorified typer that just types code, yes, you're going to feel like this. But if you're focused on building and your end result, you're feeling like this right now. You're dancing in the rain, right? We're just trying to get products out. We don't care how we get there.